Yes, now Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania, key member of the Judiciary Committee. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us. Let me get your quick reaction to the breaking news we've been following. The transcripts just released from two key witnesses, one of them from OMB, Mark Sandy, a top official on national security there. The other, Phil Rieker, the acting assistant secretary of state for European and Eurasian affairs. But as far as Mark Sandy is concerned, he apparently told lawmakers in a sworn deposition that he was not given any reason why the nearly $400 million in authorized aid to Ukraine was frozen until September. So how concerning is that lack of transparency to you?
Well, it's very concerning. It sadly meets all the evidence that we heard in the open hearings over the course of 2 weeks. What else I saw, and I was only able to read some of the top line releases on that deposition, were that once he questioned why this aid was being withheld, he learned, number one, it was the president directly who upheld the aid. He learned that through Mick Mulvaney's office. But then he was removed from authorization of foreign aid. He was taken off those duties. He also said he was gravely concerned about the legality of withholding that aid. What we know is there was an attempt to extort a foreign democracy, a brand new president, in exchange for dirt on a political opponent. The president tried to self-deal, tried to bribe the president, President Zelensky, for his own political gain. Dr. Hill said it so, I thought, interestingly, and I'll paraphrase it only, but she said it was a private domestic errand that Mr. Sondland and others were on, Mr. Giuliani were on, for the President of the United States. And she realized that she was on a very different path. She was on a path about national security. Ironic that Secretary of State Pompeo is talking about national security. The threat was from within. It was from this very administration, withholding aid from a friend who is under invasion by our foe and their foe, withholding military aid in order to bribe dirt on a political foe. It's just grave, damning evidence. And so I look forward to getting Sandy's deposition as well as all the others. You know that report is now being written. We saw 2 weeks' worth of public testimony that was, I think, courageous career diplomats. But remember, there are dozens of hours of private testimony, depositions, that will be a part of the report and the evidence that will come to judiciary, I think, as early as next week.
The acting assistant secretary of state for European affairs, Phil Rieker, testified that Ambassador Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, had what he calls a script for the Ukrainian President Zelensky to use in the phone conversation he had with President Trump. Is that how foreign policy is supposed to be conducted?
I'm not a career diplomat, but that was one of the striking things between the testimony of Mr. Sondland and the testimony of the career diplomats. Certainly that is an extraordinarily irregular way to conduct foreign affairs and diplomacy in order to try to preserve peace in that country and stability, our own national stability. That did not seem like somebody who was steeped in diplomacy or how to move forward. That was a script that was for a political errand only.
The impeachment investigation now enters a critically important new phase next week when your committee, the Judiciary Committee, holds its first public hearing on this whole matter. Will you have received the full report from the House Intelligence Committee before a week from tomorrow, December 4th, when your committee is supposed to open up its hearings?
I don't know, Wolf. I hope so. I know they're working over this Thanksgiving break to complete the report. They worked so well and for so many hours, so I thank the staff of that committee, of those committees. But I hope we will have the report as early as next week, and you do know that Jerry Nadler, the chairman, has put forward that we will have our first hearing Wednesday, December the 4th, 10 a.m., on the constitutional question of impeachment. So I look forward to beginning that serious, grave journey.
But I assume that Jerry Nadler will want that House Intelligence Committee report before he convenes his hearing.
Yes, and recognize what this first hearing is about. It is not on the evidence that will come forward in that report. We need to make sure we see all of the evidence. But what Judiciary has the opportunity to do is to inform everybody, including the American people, on exactly the constitutionality of the steps of impeachment. What are high crimes and misdemeanors? What did our founders intend? And so it is, in part, a very academic presentation that we will go through, and we'll have the chance to ask academics, historians, questions about what rises to the level of high crime, misdemeanor, treason, or bribery, as our founders and framers put forward. Certainly what they were thinking about was that somebody might get in office and either be so corrupt as to self-deal or so corrupt as to abuse his office or her office, or would invite the foreign interference by another country into our elections. Those are some of the things that our founders were worried about. And so this will be a chance for us and for America to be schooled again in what is it that impeachment actually entails. I think about it. I mean, I'm old enough to remember both Nixon and Clinton,
Yep.
but there are a whole host of young people who don't. And I'm happy to say we don't go through this kind of a journey, a grave journey, very often in this country. I hope we don't have to go through it ever again in my lifetime. But we do need to remind ourselves what actually is a high crime and misdemeanor. So I look forward to that education.
We'll be watching that hearing a week from tomorrow. Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, of course, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.